years. I've been going backwards and forwards, family reasons, business, politics, now writing. And I've been going backwards and forwards to China for 30 years, going back to days I was in Shell and doing planning and looking at the future of their big investments there. So I saw this new world beginning to emerge, and you described it a few minutes ago very well, the world in which you have two Asian superpowers and the United States. Not clear how we fit in with that, or indeed how Europe fits in with that. And so I just wanted to look back historically at how these two countries got where they are, and then also look forward next 20 years. What will the world look like, how we should relate to it. And as you say, do we disconnect or do we try to live with it?
Well, of course, yesterday, President Trump met President Xi in South Korea. And straight after this meeting, Trump boarded an Air Force One plane and returned to the US. And while on the plane, gave reporters his summary of his 90-minute conversation with the Chinese president.
Overall, I guess on the scale of from 0 to 10, with 10 being the best, I would say the meeting was a 12. Okay, I think it was a 12. A lot of things we discussed in great detail. A lot of things we brought to finalization. A lot of finalization. I've agreed, as you know, I put a 20% tariff on China because of the fentanyl coming in, which is it's a big tariff. And based on his statements today, I reduced it by 10%, so it's 10% instead of 20% effective immediately. We agreed I'll be going to China in April, and he'll be coming here sometime after that. Ukraine came up very strongly. We talked about it for a long time, and we're both going to work together to see if we can get something done.
So all is hunky-dory between President Trump and President Xi. I'd like to, if you've got questions for Vince Cable, he's going to be here with me till 9, and we are streaming this live on Global Player and the LBC app if you want to watch. Do give us a call about not just Britain's relationship with China and India, but the sort of the wider diplomatic implications, the economic implications, anything you like, because Vince knows a lot about this. I'm going to confess that I don't, so I'm not going to intervene too much. 0345 6060 973. Well, let's start off by talking about the relationship between the United States and China, which has not always been a particularly happy one, but it's developed in very interesting ways since Nixon first went to China. What was it, 1970?
Yeah, so certainly in the Mao period, he wasn't really concerned with economics. I mean, it was geopolitics. Yeah. He was trying to recruit an ally to face off against the Soviet Union, and actually rather skillful. And the economic outcome, China emerging as a major trading and economic power occurred later. And in fact, it's quite interesting. Kissinger, his accounts of his talks at that time said trade is going to be minuscule. It's not of no interest to either side, but of course was proved hopelessly wrong when Deng Xiaoping opened up China to the world.
And, I mean, moving forward, I mean, obviously China has developed in many different ways. I mean, essentially it is you can't describe it as a totally capitalist country.
Well, I call it state capitalist.
Yeah.
It's a 50-50 economy. They have a very, very dynamic entrepreneurial private sector, but they also have big state enterprises, and all things like venture capital companies are actually owned by the state in China. And so there's a guiding hand, through the planning system, and you could call it picking winners, something we don't do that so much here, but certainly taking a 20-year view about technology and pursuing it. But it's partly private sector, partly public sector. India's the same, a slightly different history, but it's the same kind of 50-50 country.
When you look at what's been reported with this 90-minute conversation between Trump and Xi, do you think that they have reached an understanding? Because Trump I've always felt that he seems to, when he's with Xi or whether he's talking about him, it's almost as if he's the supplicant, that he's the junior partner in the discussion. I mean, when they were in front of the cameras yesterday, he seemed eager to please President Xi in a way.
Well, I think deep down that probably is right, but Xi is, I think, quite clever in portraying it as a Trump win. And actually, the fact that they've reached what amounts to a ceasefire, it's not a complete peace and sweetness and love. But a ceasefire on tariffs and control of these rare minerals it's good news for the world, because I think if they were at a stage of conflict, it would be damaging for all of us. So the fact that they've agreed to put their weapons aside for the moment and cooperate is to both their credit.
How much understanding do you think President Xi has of America? Because I gather he did actually live in America for a brief time in Iowa.
Some of his key people in the Standing Committee, the top 7, have this kind of American background, but they were there a long time ago, and I suspect that they misread it, and in the way that the Americans misread China. I mean, I read all the time that American leaders who think that somehow China's on the verge of collapse. It's not. It's extremely strong, well-organized, well-marshaled, formidable. And I think that in a way the Chinese perhaps underestimate the Americans in the same way. They haven't seen how America has developed this very dynamic Silicon Valley-based
Because a few months ago there were even rumours that Xi's position was sort of becoming a bit dicey.
Well, I've just come back from China. I was there a few weeks back, and your range of acquaintances is obviously a bit narrow. I mean, I don't speak the language, and the people I speak to, it's sort of relatively educated, Western educated people. I didn't actually hear that. I've heard the opposite, the sort of worry in a way that Xi's grip on the country is so strong that the main anxiety will, what will we do when he goes, dies or decides to retire, which is less likely, I think.
Well, I think that's right. I've got a couple of questions for the listeners that you might want to phone in about. Do you think Trump has demonstrated by being forthright and even outrightly hostile towards Xi and China, it is possible to secure economic benefits from him? Has Trump played Xi right? I mean, what do you make of their relationship, Vince?
Well, I think it's quite a good balanced outcome. I mean, what the Chinese have demonstrated is that they have a real chokehold over the world economic system through this control of the processing of these rare metals, which are fundamental to so many advanced manufacturing industries. Trump has been shown that he can't simply impose tariffs on them in the way that he has on almost all the rest of the world. He's dealing with an equal. But the fact that they're both willing to compromise reflects a certain maturity and good sense that we should be grateful for.
And do we need to accept that China does threaten our national security? But I wonder what you think the extent of that is. But we have so many economic benefits, I guess, by trading with Beijing, even though it seems to be a bit of a one-way street.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, I get a bit irritated with this, is it a threat or isn't it? Yes, of course there are threats, and of course there are opportunities. I mean, when I was in the private sector before getting into Parliament, when we were dealing with a big business proposition, you put a whiteboard and you put threats on one side and opportunities on the other, and you try to balance them, and that's what we have to do as a country. But simply, trying to deal with it through a slogan, one side or the other, is extremely unhelpful.
But I suppose we don't have these conversations about dealing with South Korea or Japan. We don't see them as a threat to our national security, but China is.
No, not directly.
Why are they launching so many cyber attacks on us?
Well, there are attacks from Chinese entities, some of which may be part of the state, may not be. No, let me go back to my time in government, because we cooperated at that stage with Huawei, which is a Chinese telecoms company, who were fairly intimately involved with our national security networks. And I used to ask the officials and the security guys, are you worried about this? Isn't this a threat? And the answer was potentially. But we can manage it. We know what they're doing. We can control the situation. And that's, I think, how the more sophisticated people in the system see it.
But why would we want to deal with them? If they are constantly attacking us through cyber attacks or through whatever means, why would we want to deal with them rather than putting much more effort into dealing with friendly countries?
Well, I think friendly, unfriendly. There are aspects of China which are very positive. I mean, they do want to work with us in many areas, and there are many advantages to us. I mean, I think about 5%. They're one of our largest export markets, goods and services. British companies invest in China and derive considerable benefit from it, which is ploughed back here, and they experience what you're describing. And certainly the company I work for, Shell, had quite a difficult relationship with the Chinese because they bargain extremely hard, can be quite brutal. Treatment of staff wasn't always good, and they had to balance that against the importance of being in China and developing a relationship, which they have, and it's been very successful. And so it's not a good bad. I mean, there are bad elements in Chinese behaviour, and there are good elements. And I think when it comes to things, this so-called spying. I mean, the simple truth, if you go back to Snowden and the WikiLeaks and so on, I mean, all major countries spy. They all conduct espionage. We do on friends and enemies, if you want to characterize it like that. So, we're dealing with a very messy world. And I think we have to be grown up enough to accept that dealing with China is exceptionally difficult because there are genuine threats, but there are major opportunities as well.
OK, we'll come back to the spying in just a moment. 0345 6060 973 if you'd like to put a question or a comment to Sir Vince Cable. He's here with me until 9. It's 19 minutes past 8.
This is LBC.
Whether you're managing a business or a football club, your team are your biggest strength. But when it comes to cybersecurity, they could also be your biggest weakness. 88% of cybersecurity breaches are caused by normal human error. So how do you help your team form the ultimate impenetrable line of defence? Just ask BT.
We had our smart meter installed a year ago, and it's made things so much easier. Not having to submit meter readings or having to deal with estimated bills is great.
A smart meter sends meter readings direct to your energy supplier. It means you get accurate bills, not estimated bills, and you don't even need an internet connection. Call your energy supplier to request a smart meter today.
Real testimonials voiced by actors. Eligibility may vary.
A Thameslink train is a place where family moments become more peaceful. Where you can spread out and a game of I Spy gets a scenic upgrade with snacks, stories and the occasional sheep for a bonus point. Less stress, more yes with kids' tickets for £2 at thameslinkrailway.com. Terms apply.
You asked, BT answered.
Keeping your team cyber aware is really important in the modern marketplace. Regular training on things like data handling, spotting threats and securing their devices helps you keep them and your business safe.
Cybersecurity is everyone's business. Search BT Business Cybersecurity to find out more.
Iain Dale on LBC.
It's 20 past 8 here on LBC. Sir Vince Cable is with me. We're talking about his book called Eclipsing the West. If you're watching on Global Player, I'm brandishing it now. It's got a lovely cover. Eclipsing the West, China, India and the Forging of a New World. So we're concentrating on China and India. We're asking you, can we trust China? They've clearly ripped up the agreement we made in Hong Kong. They're spying on us. And also they're launching cyber attacks on us. And yet they seem to be a country that we're slightly afraid to confront. Now, they're obviously a much bigger country than us. They are a superpower. But I wonder, Vince, in terms of our relationship with China, how does that differ from our major European competitors?
Well, our major European competitors have been much more engaged with China than we have, actually. The German auto industry is very heavily linked into the Chinese market and until recently made most of the cars that are consumed in China until the emergence of the Chinese EV industry in the last few years. So the French attach enormous importance to the Chinese market. Their luxury goods industries are particularly important there. And I think most European countries have wanted to keep a relative degree of what they call strategic autonomy, sort of big words trying to say basically that we want to have dealings with America, China, and much of the global south as best we can.
Let's go to a call. It's from Michael in Rains Park. Hello, Michael.
Good evening, Ian. Good evening, Sir Vince.
Hi.
There's always a lot of talk about de-dollarization. The US dollar has been falling over the last 6 months or so, but in 30 years' time, do you think that the US dollar will still be the global reserve currency, or do you think it may be eclipsed by the yuan or gold or even Bitcoin?
Well, there is a move at the moment to try to shift business dealings and also central bank reserves away from the dollar for a mixture of reasons. I mean, partly in the short run because Trump's erratic behavior is causing lack of faith in the dollar. I think it's fallen in value by 10% since he came into office. But there is a longer-term question that a lot of countries are concerned that they will be subject either to sanctions or secondary sanctions in the way that Russia has been. It's a particular concern in India as well as in China, Brazil too, and those countries and others are trying to diversify. They're finding it difficult because actually one of the ways in which the United States is still the dominant superpower is the use of the dollar is widespread and dominant. It's very convenient. People trust it by and large. And until there's a serious problem, for example, as could happen with American public debt, the US dollar is likely to remain important. So that's one way in which the Americans have some sort of leverage over the Chinese to counteract some of the actions that the Chinese can take. And I think it's quite healthy that the Americans they're clearly losing their grip in many ways, but that they have this one significant advantage over the Chinese.
Michael?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, from what I've heard, most commentators agree that the dollar is still hugely dominant, but it has been falling in value over time, and there is some speculation that you've got this BRICS movement where China, Russia and India are actively trying to move away from the dollar. And the speculation about, whilst there's uncertainty, there has been a move to gold. And there is some speculation that in the future, maybe digital coins, either stable coins or Bitcoin, could act as a global currency at some point in the future.
Yes, you're right. I mean, in the short term, what's happening is that central banks are moving out of the dollar into European currencies, or Japanese yen, which is popular at the moment. Not many people want to hold the Chinese yuan, or renminbi as it's sometimes called, because it's not convertible. There is quite severe exchange controls, so it's not attractive as an asset for other people to hold. But I think in the long run, with the development of digital currencies, which they're working on, that things may well change.
We mentioned the planned embassy a few moments ago. Let's go into that in a little bit more detail. Do you think this embassy should go ahead, given the concerns from here in the UK and also in the US that it's going to be located right above sensitive communication lines between the City of London and and Canary Wharf? And that inevitably presents a risk to our national security, doesn't it?
Well, it depends what the advice is from the security agencies. I mean, whoever's the government has at the end of the day, if they get a very clear red light from the security services that this is a danger, then I think any responsible politician of any party has to follow that. I don't honestly know what the position is. It is very technical. My understanding is that if the Chinese wanted to spy on City of London transactions, there are far easier ways of doing it than tapping into this particular location. But I don't know. And I think this is an area where it's, politicians shouldn't just be throwing around opinions. I think it is a very technical judgment.
If the judgment is that it should not be given planning permission, what do you think the impact would be on the relationship between our two countries?
Well, the way the Chinese tend to operate is that they're quite good at compartmentalizing problems. You can cooperate in one area and you have fierce arguments and disputes in another. So I think probably what they would do is make life difficult for the UK embassy in Beijing, which is also trying to expand. So they see it as a quid pro quo.
Okay, let's take a text here. It doesn't have a name. Do put names on texts. It's always nicer. History will look very unkindly on people who think like Vince Cable, says this person. Knowing what the Chinese are doing is no defence whatsoever against the existential threat. You need a lot more control over the situation than that. You need to know that they're doing what you told them to do or not work with them at all. It's not enough to give a wide brief either. You need to micromanage the hell out of it. You need to be capable of micromanaging the hell out of it. That's the true danger and the true threat from China. When you let go of your authority over the trade relationship, we've already done that.
Well, Britain has isolated itself from the European Union. Obviously, it would be much more comfortable if we were basing our external relationships on Europe, the country with a very similar political outlook to ours, and it was a single market that we were very closely enmeshed with. But we've walked away from that. Britain is now on its own, and we've got to strike relationships with countries outside Europe. I mean, it's part of the fact of life, and some of them are comfortable to deal with, and many of them are not. Very large number of countries in the so-called global south have human rights problems, can fairly be challenged on those grounds. And one particular bugbear of mine when I was in politics was Saudi Arabia. But I would now say we have to deal with the Saudis as a matter of practical reality. And I approach the Chinese in the same way.
Realpolitik.
I'm afraid that is the world we're now in. It is a hard, realpolitical world where relationships are now based on transactions. Our dealings with the United States have now become much more difficult and hardball. It's not sentiment, and I think we have to approach China in the same way.
And I mean, just to insert a little bit of British politics into this, Ed Davey, your successor, but one as leader of the Lib Dems, was it? Or was it?
But one, yeah.
He's been very antagonistic towards President Trump and so boycotted the state dinner with President Trump. I mean, I've always thought that was just gratuitous virtue signalling. Do you think that's a really good place for the Lib Dems to be? But it does differentiate them, I guess, from the other parties.
Well, I would have done exactly what David done. And I think since we're talking about the wider picture, he's also been quite aggressive on China as well. I mean, a very strong spokesman on human rights issues in relation to China.
You didn't boycott the state dinner when President Xi came, did you?
I don't think he was leader at the time. But
I think he was. I think he came in 2012.
Well, it was shortly after that disastrous election when Ned and I both lost our seats temporarily.
Oh,
so I don't think we were in a position to make that kind of gesture. But nonetheless, no, I think what Ed Davey's doing in relation to Trump, which is very important, is that there's some very, very unsatisfactory aspects of our relationship with the United States. I mean, I've had a look at that trade agreement that we agreed to, and it effectively signs away any kind of technological sovereignty in the UK. I mean, we've effectively said that without getting American approval, we will not tax or regulate American big high-tech companies. I mean, that's a very dangerous place to be in. And we've got to a position of dependence on the US, which is understandable from a defense point of view. Of course, we need their support, and particularly in Ukraine. But the economic relationship is a very uncomfortable one. And I think Ed was quite right to speak against some of the things that the Trump administration is doing. And, the Lib Dems, I think, very creditable.
OK, we've got another half an hour with Sir Vince Cable taking your calls and questions. 0345 6060 973. What do you think our relationship with China should be? And we'll turn our attention a bit towards India as well in the next few minutes. You're listening to LBC. It's 8:31, and let's get the latest news headlines with Tim Daly.
Buckingham Palace says Prince Andrew is to lose all of his remaining titles and will now be known as Andrew Mountbatten of Windsor. He'll also be leaving Royal Lodge and moving to a home on the Sandringham estate. The Conservative leader has been telling LBC she thinks the Chancellor is guilty of astonishing hypocrisy over the lack of a rental licence for her South London home. Kemi Badenoch's been speaking after it emerged estate agents had failed to apply for the right documentation. And Hurricane Melissa is now travelling towards Bermuda after devastating large parts of Jamaica, Cuba and Haiti. Over 70% of electricity customers in Jamaica have spent another day without power. LBC weather, rain moving eastwards across the country overnight before clear spells and showers follow from the west, staying windy with a low of around 8 degrees.
LBC.
One of the best things about a holiday with Saga is your chauffeur, who'll pick you up and drive you to your departure point. Whether you're cruising through Europe's iconic cities along the Danube or enjoying a rainforest tour through Costa Rica. Even better, they'll pick you up and drive you home again afterwards. 2026 season now on sale. Search Saga Holidays. Experience is everything. Nationwide chauffeur service available on UK mainland. Full terms apply. Over 50s only.
This Waitrose Wine Lover Week, find your perfect match with 4 for 3 on wine and fizz. Meet our smooth Argentinian Catina Malbec that can handle the rich flavours of roast beef, or the elegant #1 Chablis, effortlessly charming with a cheese board. Perhaps your type is more bubbly, like our Cave de Turckheim Cremant d'Alsace, an unforgettable fling for any canapé. Find your perfect wine pairing at Waitrose, the home of food lovers. Selected stores and lines subject to availability. Exclude Scotland boxed wines and bottles priced £6 or under and £100 or over.
I'm telling you, raise taxes, that's how.
Cut spending, less waste, more sense.
Move north, get more for your money.
Until winter hits your heating bill.
Fair.
Up to 9.13% annual return. We all agree that's strong.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's hard to ignore.
Cufflink. Auto invest property backed from £500. Visit cufflink.com. That's KUFLINK. Register your interest today. Your capital is at risk. Tax rules apply to if ISAs and may be subject to change. Cufflink is authorised and regulated by the FCA.
Iain Dale. Text 84850. This is LBC.
Sir Vince Cable is with me talking about his new book, Eclipsing the West, China, India and the Forging of a New World. And we're talking about this today because of the meeting between President Trump and President Xi, which, according to Trump, went very well indeed. Going back to the subject of the embassy, Bernie says, Boris Johnson already gave permission for the new super Chinese embassy when he was Foreign Secretary. The current lot are trying to find a reason to break the agreement. A Tory agreed it, other Tories don't like it. I don't think that's right, is it? I don't think that it was in the planning process. I don't think Boris Johnson had it within his power to do that.
Well, I think he approved it in principle from a government point of view, but right. Planning is planning, and it's how Hamlet's counsel, slightly odd counsel, but ultimately they have the right of appeal.
And then they referred it to the Secretary of State, who's now dithering. But we're supposed to get a decision in December, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if we didn't. Let's go to Jay, who is in Harrow. Hello, Jay.
Hello, Iain.
Hi.
It's a pleasure to speak to you. Hello, Sir Vince.
Hello.
Pleasure to speak to you both.
Thank you.
I wondered if you could explain in layman's terms to the listeners what the BRICS bloc is all about, because it's a bit more than just a trading bloc, isn't it?
Well, it's not really a trading bloc at all, actually. It's not really a trading bloc. It's a political group of countries that used to be called non-aligned, but want to make common cause when they're arguing, particularly with the United States. And China is a member, Russia is a member, Brazil, India, Indonesia, I think Saudi Arabia has now joined. So it's the countries of the global south, if you still regard China as part of the global south, but it's not economic, except in the one sense of that they're all trying to de-dollarize. They're trying to reduce their dependency on
the dollar.
That's the one practical thing they're trying to do.
Yeah, but they're also setting up a lot of large infrastructure projects, like in North Africa and countries that the US used to have a foothold in. So they had a bit of soft power there, if you like. And the US have turned their back on that now.
Yes,
and
well,
they're getting the influence that the US and the European Union once would have had.
Yeah, you're quite right, but we're talking about China here. The Chinese have this program called the Belt and Road Initiative, which is absolutely staggering in scale. And many parts of Africa and Latin America and Southeast Asia it's not aid, it's lending by Chinese banks. And what the Chinese have been very good at is they do infrastructure very competently and very fast.
They've economically colonised a lot of countries.
Well, that's putting it in a negative way. Many of them welcome it because as the listener made the point, that the United States and Europe withdrew from Africa, took very little interest in its development, and the Chinese have stepped into the vacuum. I think it's fair to say that India is now trying to do its own version of the Belt and Road Initiative. The Turks are also heavily involved now in infrastructure, but unfortunately the Western world missed the boat, and other countries are now occupying those emerging economies.
Okay, thank you very much, Jay. Now we're going to break into this for a moment because we're going to hear from our political editor, Natasha Clark, who was eagerly listening to my hour with Kemi Badenoch. Natasha, very good evening to you. What stood out for you?
Very good evening to you, Ian. Of course, I was eagerly listening to your phone-in with Kemi Badenoch, as I always do as a diligent political editor. I thought her chat with you was really interesting, and I thought what you were saying to our colleague Tom Swarbrick earlier about you thinking that she's turned a corner, well, it does feel a little bit like, at least in her attitude and her demeanour, I thought she felt a lot more relaxed in that phone-in than potentially some of the other ones that she's done with you in the past. But obviously, you wanted to press her at the very beginning on the story of the day, really, which has been Rachel Reeves, and she has been very much leading the way on this story, calling for Miss Reeves to be sacked over the letting story that's been obviously running on LBC all day. She told you that she doesn't think the Chancellor is out of the woods just yet.
I don't know that she is in the clear. And it's been fascinating watching Labour, lurch from one place to another. Let's remember, Keir Starmer said lawmakers shouldn't be lawbreakers. And he was very happy to chase every fixed penalty notice that occurred under the Conservatives. What Rachel Reeves looks like she has done is a criminal offence. It is the Housing Act that Labour brought in 2004 that says that under these regulations, if you have not followed the council guidelines, you are creating a criminal offence. And not just that, Rachel Reeves tweeted 10 days ago saying these were fantastic regulations. She likes to see them in her constituency. She wants to see it extended. And then it turns out that it hasn't applied to her. I think that is astonishing. This is where an investigation is necessary.
So I thought it was really interesting, actually. And obviously, I think, to be fair to Miss Badenoch, she does have a point here. Rachel Reeves isn't out of the woods yet. That letting agency letter that we saw a couple of hours ago does appear to exonerate at least her of some responsibility. But yet tonight, we haven't yet heard exactly from Sir Laurie Magnus about whether there will be any continued probe. We haven't heard from the Prime Minister saying he accepts all of her apology in full, exactly the same as we did last night. So it doesn't feel to me quite like this is done and dusted yet. You, of course, Ian, wanted to ask her about the other huge breaking news story tonight, the news that Prince Andrew will be losing his prince title and move out of Royal Lodge. Here was Miss Badenoch's response to that breaking news.
I've been following this story more about a family. It's a very sad state of affairs. I think that the King has clearly felt that this is the right decision for the royal family. It must have been a very difficult thing for him to have done. I mean, that's having to do that to your own brother. But the standards and expectations in society now are very high. People expect to see the very highest levels of integrity. And I'm afraid the whole Jeffrey Epstein saga and everyone it has touched, from Prince Andrew to Peter Mandelson, has just shown that the public has no truck whatsoever with any kind of sexual abuse, sexual offences, especially of minors. And I think that that's quite right.
And of course, Prince Andrew denies all wrongdoing in this. But in the last few minutes, we've also got a statement from Virginia Giuffre's family. They say, today, an ordinary American girl from an ordinary American family brought down a British prince with her truth and extraordinary courage. Virginia Roberts Giuffre, our sister, a child when she was sexually assaulted by Andrew, never stopped fighting for accountability for what had happened to her and survivors like her. Today, she declares a victory. We, her family, along along with her survivor sisters, continue Virginia's battle and will not rest until the same accountability applies to all of her abusers and abettors connected to Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. So very, very powerful statement coming in. And again, we should say that Prince Andrew does deny that. But it is such an extraordinary state of affairs that we are, of course, seeing tonight, that Prince Andrew is going to be stripped of his prince title. Finally, Ian, I just wanted to play a little bit of an extract of what Kemi Badenoch said about the row about that Reform MP, Sarah Pochen. Of course, that row over the weekend where Miss Pochen, the Reform MP, said that it made her mad to see so many black and Asian faces in our advertising industry. She felt that they are being overrepresentative. Kemi Badenoch did agree, but she asked, well, how on earth does she think that my children feel hearing remarks from Sarah Pochen like that?
I just rolled my eyes because I think they're very silly people and they don't think through what they say. I do actually, as it happens, feel that ethnic minorities are overrepresented in advertising. But why it happens is the interesting thing. It is because everybody is trying to meet a target. If one person is doing it, it works. If everybody is doing it, then something weird happens and they're overcompensating. But we should be talking about making sure that the advertising standards are fit for purpose. Instead, saying that it makes you sick or it makes you mad or whatever it was, that's just, it offends people. I mean, how does she think my children would feel hearing that? We need to make sure that as politicians, we speak responsibly, even when we can see something that's not working quite well. We've got to make sure that the language we use is fit for purpose.
So loads of news lines there from you, Ian. She doesn't think Rachel Reeves is in the clear, says it must have been very difficult for the King to strip Andrew of his Prince title, insisting the Tories are still relevant despite their poor polling of late, talking about Sarah Pochen and how her children may have felt hearing that criticism, and of course dismissing Boris Johnson's criticism of the Tory party's backtrack on green policy. So all in all, a very entertaining hour, I thought, Ian. Well done.
Wasn't me that was entertaining. I said to her afterwards,